The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. Now, when Robert Frost said this, he meant something. He said that pledges have to be made before he completes his journey. Are the authorities already asleep before fulfilling the promises that they have made to the public in Sri Lanka? Budget 2016. Is it a revolution, a manipulation, or a deception? To discuss all this and more, I have with me a well-renowned Executive Director of the Pathfinder Foundation, Mr. Lakshman Sirivardhana. Mr. Sirivardhana, nice to have you on board on Newsfirst in Focus today. Starting off, let's move to our first subject. Is Budget 2016 a revolution?
I mean, revolution in politics or economics or anything is definitely not the kind of thing that you see in the budget in 2016, although it was the promise. What you see is more or less how to make a budget which keep changing, which keep shifting its proposals to an unprecedented level.
Since November 20th, many changes have been made to the budget. It's like cutting a piece, including it, and then cutting another piece, and then listening to someone and changing. Is this the ordinary tradition adopted by finance ministries across Sri Lanka over the last few years or so?
Of course, definitely not, because if you see, when you take up a position, unless of course one or two key areas, sometimes there will be amendments or changes during the committee stage discussions, but this is a very unprecedented budget making process, if you say that. That is probably partly due to the nature of the government, which is very much a, as I told last time, very unusual animal. Within that, representations and the power centers are many. Therefore, you can expect this kind of out of the box, unusual budget making process.
Usually the finance minister is involved in the budget. Do you think the current finance minister was involved in formulating the present budget?
Current finance minister? I of course think that it is definitely that minister and some of his probably close people could be the core team rather than even the Ministry of Finance conventional core team, because the way it is being shifted and changed, and what we hear from the grapevine is that it could be the finance minister and some of his.
We saw the first budget, the interim budget that was presented by the UNP-led government in early January 2015, Mr. Sirivardhana, which clearly was deemed as a vengeful budget in terms of the corporates in Sri Lanka. We saw the super gain tax coming into play. However, this time around, do you think that certain corporates have been targeted in terms of its taxation policy?
Probably to give benefits, maybe this time. Earlier it was what you said, is vengeful, attack, kill, ruin, do something against on the super gains tax and similar, targeting CSN, and those are not the type of thing to be done by in a budget. This time probably you don't know, because there are certain cases where export cess has been removed. Probably I think it's from pepper, but not much more important areas it has not been touched. Therefore, it seems that individual petty interest groups, cronyism, seems to have crept into the budget making process as well.
Many say the taxation policy in terms of vehicles, taxing the electric vehicles.
Well, that's a great, because Sri Lanka may be the one and only country in the world to see such a emission-free vehicle is been at a very high rate, is being taxed and virtually pushed it out of the market, while fossil fuel burning vehicles are taxed at much lower level.
We've seen over the last few years, when you take a look at certain countries' economies, where the IMF plays a huge role with their standby agreement or the arrangements given to these countries, take into account, they've always, the IMF has a clear, distinct policy that not electric vehicles. We have to always look at the possibility of bringing down vehicles that are used with fuel. Taking into account the IMF strategy, IMF policies towards the developing world and towards developing nations, do you think that the budget is manipulated by a certain outside organization? Maybe the World Bank, maybe the IMF, maybe an external party.
I'm sorry, I mean, I can't agree with you, because I don't think IMF or World Bank intentionally wants to manipulate our budgets. What happens is, actually, in general, I'm not referring only to this budget, is that the governments which go through difficult times, or which create their own big holes in trying to get out of that, like the budget, that 100-day package, disastrous economic policies are followed, then you get into a very serious situation where your foreign currency reserves are depleted. Then you try to go to the World Bank and the IMF. Not that they come and they try to manipulate your things, because when you have to go there, bankers, being strict bankers and financiers, they would like to see that you adhere to certain terms and conditions to make sure that you, out of the money that you borrow, that you do something good for the country. That is the IMF.
So there is no manipulation according to what you term in budget 2016.
Manipulation is the term that you use. Manipulation is not necessarily by the fund and the bank. It is
manipulated by who then?
Oh my God! I mean, when you have a government, or you have created a government which has several power centers, so many manipulators could be there. And if you have a wrong man in the wrong place, this is a great opportunity to give things, take things, you know. I told you, I used the word cronyism through there are opportunities are there. It is more than the outsider. Outsiders are not manipulators. What according to the published newspaper things, what has happened is, apparently when the original version of the budget included business turnover tax, which is a very much cascading effect, which has cascading effects, which is not good for good business environment. Then apparently the Washington-based institutions, I think the fund has been against that.
2002 we saw a similar budget. We saw 2002 the fertilizer subsidy being removed by the UNF regime in the year 2002. A similar format this time around as well. The fertilizer subsidy somewhat has been cut off in terms of the farmers. Why is this?
You know, I also sometimes subscribe to this because, you know, when you give things free to farmers, they produce something which makes them stay in that farming circle, and instead of trying to do something more productive, we create a condition that it is better profitable for them to farm. The second thing is, farm subsidies always, farmers subsidies, fertilizer subsidies have always leaked out into other areas, like huge plantation companies were enjoying that. Many others were enjoying that. And therefore, in economically really, which is not so viable crops have come to the market. Then on the other side, when there is an excess of those products, including paddy, the government goes and tells, okay, government is forced to buy them, and then the government has to give a price, guaranteed price.
So you mean to say, Mr. Varatana,
that's not a good policy.
You mean to say that the farmers need to tighten their belts and ensure that they produce what Sri Lanka requires in terms of
No, it is something like that. You can't keep everybody giving money and asking them to produce or allowing them to produce something, because you produce something at a cost, you artificially push their cost down. How long you can do that? Country, this is not the really profitable thing for them. Maybe we can import from India, maybe we can import from other countries the same product.
Many say in the year 2002, Mr. Vardhana,
at a lower price.
Mr. Srivardhana, in the year 2002, many say that the UNF-led regime lost the elections in the year 2005 because of the 2002 fertilizer subsidy that was cut off at that time. Will that cost the UNP-led government again in the year 2016? Something drastic might happen, or how do you define that?
You know, if you look at this budget, before the budget, the Prime Minister made an economic statement. There his theme was, you can't live beyond your means. That means Sri Lanka, according to the Prime Minister, as well as any economics will agree, have been living beyond our means. We earn 100, we borrow another 100, and we spend. How long you can go on doing this? We have to reduce our living standards. That is what the message is. Whatever the political implications, someday somebody will have to go.
Will that not compromise the living standards of ordinary Sri Lankans?
That's what I am saying. Yes, definitely it will. The ordinary Sri Lankans, fixed wage earners, in time to come you will see that everyone has to reduce their consumption.
So budget 2016 is a clear deception. Is that what you're trying to say?
It's not a deception. For anybody who knows a bit of what is written there, you can see that a bit of contractionary effect of that budget is there, unless or otherwise massive inflow of foreign investment takes place within a short period of time. I don't know whether that is reality, that will be real. It's not a deception. Deception is the fact that while present in the budget, the government trying to say that this is for the people's budget, this is for the ordinary masses. You can't, in the current situation, from what I'm taking it from what the Prime Minister said, you can't, if you want to reduce living within the means, you cannot afford to be so-called people's friendly all the time. Somebody will have to pay for. You have to reduce some of these things while maintaining some of the so-called development programs. There should be some space for money to be spent on ministers and the parliaments and all that.
Budget 2016 is going to come at a cost of stopping infrastructure development. Is that what you mean?
Unless a massive inflow of foreign direct investment comes in as private-public partnerships, or I I don't know whether they have a more headroom for borrowing from sources. Otherwise, if you can see, from the time this so-called January 8th revolution, we have stopped many ongoing infrastructure development projects. None of them have been really commenced operation since then. Already it has happened. No? It's so unfortunate because therefore you immediately see a contractionary impact on the entire economy, because construction phase is not only those companies, many others down the line are affected.
Do you think, Mr. Vardhan, taking into account the budget 2016, there is an environment for FDIs to come and invest in Sri Lanka?
Keep changing this, like what you said, the duty on cars, today one thing, tomorrow another thing, and today you have a budget which talks about removal of fertilizer subsidy. Next day you say, no, we will do it this way, keep changing. Every day you can see some changes being introduced to the budget itself. Budget is a very fundamental document. Then what about our economic policies? Policy consistency is a very fundamental requirement for foreign or even local investors to invest in Sri Lanka. Will you invest in a car, import and selling cars, when you don't know what your duties are going to be for the cars that has been already shipped?
Mr. Are you trying to say there is no stability even after 8 months, nearly 11 months have lapsed following the January 8th revolution?
Policy stabilities, there are no good statements are made by Prime Minister, but I don't see the follow through by his team. I don't see that happening. But most fundamental mistake in the current budget is that, and the changing from time to time and time again, is the budget deficit. That is where stability of the macroeconomic environment is maintained. I don't know whether this...
You're speaking of the budget deficit. I recollect Finance Minister Ravi Karunaka saying that the budget deficit will be restricted to 6.8 several weeks after, in the policy statement that was titled Economic Vision for Sri Lanka, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe saying that the budget deficit would be 3.8%, and now it's 5.8%.
No,
why does it keep on changing?
It will be, that 5.8 or 5.9% that was mentioned cannot be maintained, because subsequent to the presentation of the budget to the Parliament, some of the revenue measures were changed. Some of the key revenue measures were changed. Therefore, to begin with, at the time of the drafting of the budget, we were talking, according to the newspapers that were in the grapevine, anyway, BTT was changed to, taken back to VAT by the Prime Minister's intervention. Then there are several concessions, taxes, duties that were imposed here and there have been changed these days. You can hear from
the 5.8% is going to swell further. Is that what you're trying to say?
It will be, my gut feeling is that it should be 6.57%. It will end up, you and I can see at the end of the year what's going to happen. I think 6.57.
How are they going to bring in the revenue to cover the budget deficit?
Tax.
Tax the people.
And tax. That is, the problem is, again, this taxation is indirect taxation. If you see in this budget, NTB has been increased, nation building tax, VAT in certain areas, many the import related certain costs have been increased. All these things will be accounted, and the general price level in the country, entire price level in the country will go up. There is no way.
Burden on the people.
Burdening the people, and what Prime Minister has to stick into what he has said, no. You have to live within the means. This is, you reduce your consumption.
Live within the means. However, during the election campaign, the Prime Minister said that every household will have a car and he will make an economy of that sort. However, it seems now that affording a car alone, affording a square meal is going to be difficult, isn't it, Mrs. Vardhana?
I don't know why people in Sri Lanka still believe in election day promises. They completely deceive these innocent people of my country. I also feel sorry. I think you also seems to be very worried. You know, giving a car to every household, this kind of things, if somebody has taken them seriously, from the kind of politicians in Sri Lanka, you know, I mean, I blame the people for believing in them.
Budget 2016 is a deception, is it?
Yeah, still budget 2016, whether it is it's a real, whether it's a revolution or manipulation of data, and manipulation of data was there in that. Later it was accepted. You know, you can remember education, health related, the government expenditure all of a sudden, and deception at the end. Will that end up as deception of to the innocent people of this country? We'll have to see.
You spoke of power centers, Ms. Srivardhana. I want to drag your attention to the recent statement that was made by Minister S.P. Sarnaik, saying that the Divinagum Fund will not be in any way allowed to be amalgamated with the National Savings Bank. And Mahinda Samar Singh, who is also a minister in the present regime, the Minister of Vocational Training, stating that there may have been a confusion when the when electric cars were taxed by the Finance Minister. Many different opinions are being viewed.
What does it mean by the confusion in Finance Minister's mind?
I'm not really aware, Ms. Srivardhana, what Minister Mahinda Samar Singh was referring to, but individuals in the same cabinet, in the same government, are having different opinion about the budget 2016. Is that healthy?
I was wondering whether you were going to ask me, same people in the same government are doing that. Is that healthy?
That is right.
That is not healthy at all. This is not the way to run a country. Because you want to change one regime or bring in some unusual, some other person or team of people, you create a completely confused and non-consistent set of a government with set of people who are
some can dub it as democracy.
This is, this is the, if it evolves like this, it will be like the cabinet and the government key people, like headless chickens. To run here and there, you don't see what is no vision and start running. I am confident, I hope, I am confident, at least I pray for the President and the Prime Minister to take hold of this situation and without allowing it to develop into a headless chicken kind of situation.
Is there a vision for this government?
Vision. Generally, politicians, particularly in the recent past, have very good vision for themselves. We gain power, we remain in power, whatever that happens to the country, that vision is there, don't worry.
Politically motivated budget, is it so?
All budgets are, to some extent, politically motivated and gives the impression that it's going to bring a lot of benefits to the people. Think about, you are a person who is educated but still study. Do a research entry from 1965, 70 onwards, the number of pledges given by each year's budget speech, if they became real, Sri Lanka would have been what? Most developed, most sophisticated, most socialist and most capitalist, all that combined together country in the heaven. This is every time politicians knowingly or unknowingly mostly, but unknowingly to some extent, has postponed the country reaching the developed standard.
Mr. Vardhana, when you take a look at the budgets that have been presented by the UNP-led government this year, we saw the January interim budget coming into play, we saw the budget 2016 coming into play. Many goods have been reduced somewhat. Let's talk about fuel for an example. It was drastically reduced. Gas prices were reduced again in the 2016 budget. However, this is not reflecting the people's pocket at the end of the day. Why is this? The cost of living still remains high.
Because you remember that, please remember that some of these things are not, only the fuel and the few, like 100 rupees nowadays reduction from gas, or 150 rupees reduction of gas. You know what is 150 rupees today. On the other hand, there are large number of prices that increases due to the tariff adjustments, and there is a key factor which will really start, you will realize the impact within the next 3 to 4 months, that is the depreciation of the Sri Lankan rupee. That means every imported item, product, final product, or any item that is produced with import content will increase its prices.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sirivardhana, for joining us this evening. Budget 2016 was the topic of discussion today. Budget 2016, is it a revolution? Mr. Sirivardhana said, yes, somewhat. Is it a manipulation? He said, no. Is it a deception? He said, yes. Let's see what Sri Lanka is going to experience in the next few years, in the next few months, in the next few days, the next few hours. Budget 2016. A reality? Let's wait and see. Thank you very much for joining us this evening on Newsfirst in Focus.